could take one guy to an island with you and you knew you'd be safe because he was the best man. He was going to keep you happy. It was between me and your father. Who would you take?
My daddy.
I think you're wrong about that.
What happened to my brother?
There are films that tell a story, and then there are films that sit with you long after the credits roll, quietly unraveling in your mind, revealing new layers each time you revisit them. Manchester by the Sea is very much the latter, a deeply human, emotionally intricate exploration of grief, responsibility, and the quiet endurance of pain. Anchored by the remarkable performances of Casey Affleck, Michelle Williams, and Kyle Chandler, the film unfolds not as a conventional drama, but as something far more intimate, almost like overhearing fragments of real lives stitched together by loss in memory. At the center of the story is Lee Chandler, a man who exists in a kind of emotional exile. Living in Quincy, Massachusetts, he works as a janitor, going through repetitive motions with a detached, almost mechanical demeanor. There's a heaviness to him that is immediately noticeable, a sense that he is carrying something enormous beneath the surface. His interactions are minimal, his temper unpredictable, and his life stripped down to the bare essentials. He drinks alone, picks fights, and avoids connection, as though closeness itself is something dangerous. When Lee receives news that his brother, Joe, has died suddenly, he is pulled back to Manchester by the Sea, the coastal town where he grew up. The return is not just geographical, it's emotional, psychological, and deeply uncomfortable. This is not a place of nostalgia for Lee. It's a place loaded with memories he has spent years trying to escape. The town itself feels almost like a character, cold and quiet, its gray skies and wintry landscapes mirroring Lee's internal state. Joe's death introduces the central conflict. Lee discovers that he has been named the legal guardian of his teenage nephew, Patrick. This revelation is not framed as a heartwarming twist or a convenient narrative device. Instead, it lands with the weight of obligation and disbelief. Lee is not a man equipped for parenting, nor is he someone who believes he deserves a second chance at caring for another human being. The idea of staying in Manchester, of taking responsibility for Patrick, feels almost impossible to him. Patrick, on the other hand, is not portrayed as a helpless or broken teenager. He's lively, sarcastic, and determined to maintain his normal life despite his father's death. He plays in a band, juggles relationships with 2 girlfriends, and navigates school with a kind of stubborn resilience. His grief is present, but it manifests differently from Lee's. Where Lee withdraws, Patrick pushes forward, clinging to routine as a way to stay afloat. This contrast creates a dynamic that is both compelling and painfully realistic. 2 people experiencing the same loss in completely different ways, struggling to find a rhythm together. As Lee and Patrick spend more time together, the film gradually reveals the past that has shaped Lee into the man he is. Through a series of flashbacks, we see glimpses of a different life, one where Lee was married to Randy, played with quiet intensity by Michelle Williams, and was a father to 3 young children. These moments are warm, filled with laughter and the kind of everyday chaos that defines family life. It's a stark contrast to the isolated figure we meet at the beginning, and it raises an unspoken question: what happened? The answer, when it comes, is devastating. In one of the film's most powerful sequences, we learn that Lee's past is marked by a tragic accident that resulted in the death of his children. The incident is not sensationalized. It unfolds with a kind of brutal simplicity that makes it the all more harrowing. A moment of carelessness, a fire left unattended, and everything is gone. The aftermath is equally crushing, particularly a police station scene where Lee, confronted with the enormity of what has happened, attempts to end his own life. It's a moment that defines him, not just because of the tragedy itself, but because of the guilt that follows, a guilt so profound that it reshapes his entire existence. This revelation reframes everything we've seen. Lee's detachment, his anger, his inability to connect, they are not random traits, but the result of a man who believes he has forfeited any right to happiness or redemption. His return to Manchester is not just inconvenient, it's a confrontation with a past he has never truly processed. Every street, every building, every familiar face becomes a reminder of what he has lost and what he cannot undo. The film does not offer easy answers or tidy resolutions. Instead, it leans into the complexity of grief and the idea that some wounds do not heal in the traditional sense. Lee's relationship with Patrick evolves in subtle ways. There are moments of awkward humor, small gestures of care, and instances where they almost feel like a functioning family. But there is also tension, misunderstanding, and the constant undercurrent of Lee's internal struggle. He tries, in his own limited way, to be there for Patrick, but the weight of his past makes it difficult for him to fully step into the role that has been thrust upon him. Patrick, for his part, begins to realize the depth of his uncle's pain. There is a gradual shift in his perspective, a growing awareness that Lee's distance is not indifference, but something far more complicated. Their interactions are often marked by a kind of blunt honesty, the kind that comes from shared grief and a lack of pretense. They argue, they joke, they navigate practical challenges like funeral arrangements and living situations, all while carrying the unspoken understanding that both of them are trying to cope in the only ways they know how. One of the film's most striking aspects is its refusal to follow conventional emotional arcs. There is no grand moment of catharsis where everything falls into place. Instead, the story moves in small, incremental steps, reflecting the reality that healing is rarely linear. Lee does not suddenly become a different person, nor does he overcome his guilt in a dramatic transformation. What we see instead is a man who begins, almost imperceptibly, to engage with the world again, even if only in limited ways. The interactions between Lee and Randy, his ex-wife, are particularly poignant. Their reunion is brief but incredibly powerful, capturing the lingering connection between two people who have shared an unimaginable loss. Michelle Williams brings a raw vulnerability to the role, and the scene is filled with unspoken emotion, apologies that cannot fully be expressed, forgiveness that is both given and incomplete, and the painful acknowledgement that some things cannot be fixed. It's a reminder that grief does not just affect individuals, it reshapes relationships, often in irreversible ways. Kyle Chandler's portrayal of Joe, though primarily seen in flashbacks, adds another layer to the story. Joe represents a kind of stability and warmth that contrasts with Lee's fractured state. His decision to name Lee as Patrick's guardian is not arbitrary. It suggests a belief that Lee, despite everything, is still capable of connection and responsibility. This belief becomes a quiet challenge that lingers throughout the film. Can Lee live up to it, or is he too deeply scarred by his past? The setting of Manchester by the Sea plays a crucial role in reinforcing the film's tone. The cold, muted palette, the sound of waves crashing against the shore, and the stillness of the town all contribute to a sense of isolation and introspection. It's a place that feels both beautiful and unforgiving, much like the emotional landscape the characters inhabit. The environment does not provide comfort. Instead, it mirrors the internal struggles of those who live within it. As the story progresses, practical decisions begin to take center stage. Patrick's future becomes a pressing concern: where he will live, who will take care of him, and what kind of stability he needs moving forward. These decisions are not framed as dramatic turning points, but as necessary steps in the wake of loss. Lee's inability to remain in Manchester becomes increasingly clear, not because he doesn't care about Patrick, but because staying would mean confronting a past that continues to haunt him in ways he cannot manage. The resolution of the film is quiet and understated, staying true to its overall approach. Lee makes arrangements for Patrick to stay with another family in Manchester, ensuring that he can maintain his life, his friendships, and his sense of normalcy. It's not a failure on Lee's part, nor is it presented as a betrayal. Instead, it's an acknowledgement of his limitations, a recognition that caring for Patrick does not necessarily mean being the one to raise him. In the final moments, there is a sense of tentative connection between Lee and Patrick. They are not transformed into a perfect uncle-nephew duo, nor are all their issues resolved. But there is an understanding, a quiet agreement that they will remain part of each other's lives in whatever way they can manage. It's a small but meaningful step, reflecting the film's broader message that healing does not always mean moving on. Sometimes it simply means finding a way to carry what you've lost. What makes Manchester by the Sea so impactful is its commitment to authenticity. It does not manipulate emotions with grand gestures or dramatic twists. Instead, it builds its narrative through carefully observed moments, nuanced performances, and a deep respect for the complexity of human experience. The characters feel real, their struggles relatable, and their choices grounded in a kind of emotional truth that resonates long after the film ends. Casey Affleck's performance is central to this authenticity. He portrays Lee with a restraint that makes the character's internal turmoil all the more powerful. There are no exaggerated displays of emotion, no overt attempts to elicit sympathy. Instead, we see a man who has shut down as a means of survival, whose pain is evident not in what he says, but in what he cannot say. It's a performance that demands attention, not through spectacle, but through subtlety, and it anchors the entire film. Michelle Williams and Kyle Chandler provide equally compelling support, each bringing depth and humanity to their roles. Together, the cast creates a world that feels lived in and genuine, where every interaction carries weight and meaning. The film's dialogue, often understated and naturalistic, further enhances this sense of realism, allowing the story to unfold in a way that feels organic rather than constructed. Ultimately, the film is not about overcoming tragedy in the traditional sense. It is about living with it, about the ways in which people adapt to loss and continue forward, even when the path is unclear. It challenges the idea that there must always be closure or redemption, suggesting instead that some experiences leave a permanent mark, and that's okay. There is a quiet dignity in simply enduring, in finding small moments of connection and meaning amid the pain. In that sense, Manchester by the Sea stands as a powerful meditation on grief, responsibility, and the fragile nature of human resilience. It invites viewers to sit with discomfort, to engage with emotions that are often difficult to articulate, and to recognize the complexity of the human condition. It's not an easy film to watch, nor is it meant to be, but for those willing to engage with it, it offers an experience that is deeply moving, profoundly honest, and ultimately unforgettable.